Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're here with Dr. Anthony Carlisle, a local author, uh, to talk about his debut novel, The Souls of Clayhatchee. It's very nice to have you here tonight, Dr. Carlisle. Thank you for coming.
Well, thanks for having me.
Just so everybody knows, we're going to have a couple sections of questions and answers during this with a reading in the middle. So if you would like to ask a question during one of those times, you can unmute yourself and ask Dr. Carlisle personally, or you can place it into the chat function and I will read that question during one of the Q&As. So, all right. Just to, oh, here we go. Person on the way in. So do you want to tell us just a little bit about yourself to get started, Dr. Carlisle?
Oh, for sure. So I'm a husband and I'm a father. I'm married to Dr. Amy Alexander, who's a counselor in Penn Hills High School, and I have two adult children, Ariel, who is 31, and Amaya Carlisle, who is 20. I'm a professor, associate professor at California University of Pennsylvania, in the Department of Media, Performance, and Culture. I have been at CalU for 19 years now. I'm from Amherst originally, if anyone's from Beaver County. Prior to working at Cal, well, let me back up. At Cal, I teach journalism, I teach literature, I teach freshman composition. I've been there for 19 years. Prior to CalU, I was a reporter for 11 years. My first newspaper I worked at was the New Pittsburgh Courier. After that, I worked for the Daily News in McKeesport. From there, I went to the Pittsburgh Business Times. From there, I went to the Beaver County Times, and from there, I went to Pittsburgh Tribune Review. And I've covered every type of things. I've covered sports, I've covered manufacturing, I've covered entertainment, social issues, police and crime. So I've done everything, I guess, in journalism for a lot. And I just wrote a book, Souls of Clayhatchee. So my first novel, I'm pretty excited about that.
It's a very interesting and varied, career and approach to writing. Has writing always been a part of your life? Did you write when you were a child, or was that something you came to later?
I've always been interested in writing, and so I tell folks it starts with reading. So I was a reader, stayed in the library, especially in my school. So I love reading, and in fact, I sent a copy of my book to my elementary library teacher. Just really influential. So I started with reading everything. My family, I came from a house of readers, so there was always books around, and folks always, they had their heads in books. So from there, I just started writing. I wanted to tell stories as well. And I remember just, as a kid, just doing stupid things like writing Different Strokes. That was my favorite show. So I would write the next script for the next show. And so then as a teenager, I wrote bad poetry. So always was interested in writing and really in fiction type writing.
Okay, so you've always had that interest in fiction. Do you remember, what would you say were your favorite books, or maybe your favorite genre when you were a kid?
You know what? I think I've read almost anything and everything. I was kind of a weird kid, and I was trying to think about this when it was a series, and I can't even remember it. I wish I knew the names, but it was like a kid book, and it was a family that was in the 19th century, late 19th century family. And oh, this. Sorry. Okay. Oh, this is better. So it was a kid. It was about a family. And the kid was precocious, and I just love this series. And I used to read it all the time. But again, I just read anything. I read, I read Stephen King. I read Judy Collins. I read anything that was put in front of me. So whatever I could get.
That's awesome. I also, have to say, I appreciate the shout out to libraries, your childhood library. So the first question that came from an audience member was to ask you if you could describe your writing process. Sort of how long did it take you to write this book, and did you use any personal experiences, which I believe you may have?
Well, I started the book. Wow, I started the book when I was on deployment. You have some downtime, more downtime than you think. So and I forgot to mention I was in the military for 14 years, reaching the rank of captain, and I was deployed for Operation Iraqi Freedom. So during that time, you have a lot of downtime. So I did a lot of reading, and during that time, I ended up reading Eric Jerome Dickey's "Milk in My Coffee." I thought it was hilarious. I'm thinking, I'd like to write something like that. So the next day, I opened up my laptop and started working on it. And so, I had time, so I worked on it often. Then when I came back, life came back, and I had to get back into preparing for lessons. And I was working on my PhD program, so I put it down. But at some point, I got back into the writing. And I would say when I got into it, I was writing daily. I made sure that even if it was 15 minutes, I would write something. A lot of times it would go longer. I would set goals and say, okay, I'm going to write 10 pages, or I'm going to write for, 15 minutes, or I'm going to write for an hour. So I had a process. At least it was just sitting down and just doing it. So writing steadily, it might have taken about a year to finish the book.
Okay, well, and you began it when you were overseas initially. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Oh, I'm sorry. So you began it when you were overseas?
Yes, sir. Yes. And that was in 2004. I just started messing with it. But I didn't really get serious until I got back. But yeah, started there.
Okay. Once you had sort of made some progress, was there anybody you consulted with, anybody who you knew who wrote fiction who might have given you advice, or was it kind of a solo project?
Well, during the writing process, I just kind of went for it. Once it was finished, I had folks that I work at a university, so I'm surrounded by writers, and so I had colleagues take a look at it and just get feedback, and it was good.
Another question from an audience member: are there any authors you particularly like, and why do you like them? I know you mentioned Eric Jerome Dickey, but do you have any other particular favorites currently, or even fiction or nonfiction?
I like Baldwin, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, Colson, Whitehead. I'm reading James McBride. I'm loving his stuff. And the classics, the main folks, but yeah. And again, I read a lot of Walter Mosley, and I'm actually reading Daisha Phil Law, her Secret Lives of Church Ladies, and I'm enjoying that. And I recently read Damon Young's, and I enjoy his writing in general, and I especially enjoyed his book.
Great, yeah. Baldwin, Toni Morrison, those are always fantastic. Another question: are the characters of the book are they based on anyone real? Have you directly or inspiration?
So you write what you know, and so even when you're not trying to, or even when you think that this is all fiction, you're still pulling in things that you know and people that you know. So yeah, some of the characters, some of places, some of the things that are in the book come from real life. I would say, the main character, I can draw some things from my life. I was a reporter. He's a reporter. I had I think we all have Aunt D's, kind of wild and boisterous and loud, or Bunkies as cousins, so, there's a combination. My editor, his last name is Cuddy. I had an editor named Cuddy. But he's a combination of different editors that I worked with, but I just liked his last name. So, you're pulling from different aspects of your life. And it's funny because, my family, they're all trying to guess, well, is that so-and-so? Is that me? I'm like, it's fiction. It's not anyone. It's just, it's just a combination of things.
Right. Some people might inspire a character and you might not want to let them know that they inspired that character.
For sure.
So you've worked as a journalist for several newspapers. Tribune Review, the Business Times, I think you said the Courier. Could you tell us about some of your experiences there, or maybe what stories you covered that were your favorite? You said you worked on a variety, really, but did any stand out to you?
Well, a few. A lot of the crime stories, and I tell my students that the thing that I liked most about being a reporter was that you never knew what was going to happen. Day in and day out, it was always going to be different. Or you think you have a pretty calm day, and on at the end of the day something happens. So some of the big stories, 9/11, I remember just covering that and just how chaotic things were during that time. I remember covering one story that kind of sticks in my mind. It was a brother and sister, and they had lost touch with them. They were trying to get in contact. I'm thinking it had been decades, maybe at least 3 decades. And I ended up writing a story about the family, about them trying to get in contact with this brother. And what ended up happening, we found out that that the brother, he died. But they would have known that if we hadn't written the story. So there was some closure there. So yeah, that's kind of some of the things, it's one of the things that stands out.
Absolutely. That's a momentous event, and to have that kind of personal connection to have helped a family get closure, I would imagine has to be very significant. Just going to another question from the audience. The book is very descriptive in nature. Did you write it with the hope of it becoming a movie someday?
No, I just wanted to write well and use good description and try to use the things that I teach in my class. Although I don't teach fiction, as a journalist, and I always tell my students a lot of writing that we do here, it crosses over. And so, I was trying to use good description, things that I would use if I were covering an event, covering something. It's funny now, I've heard more than one person say, hey, this might make a good story and a good movie. So I'm thinking, okay, where's Hollywood at? Can I get somebody to knock on this door? But no, I didn't have that in mind. I just wanted to write a good story and use the tools of writing good stories, good description, good characters, good plot,
Okay. And besides movies, they're making a lot of great TV these days. So
Absolutely.
As long as you're not turning it down.
No, not at all.
Okay. Just get back to a couple of the questions that I had written out. A question I wanted to ask. What were the challenges you found when you started to write fiction? Were they similar to the challenges of writing nonfiction, or was it a different variety of issues?
Actually, the challenges were the same, surprisingly, in one way. Making sure things were accurate, little things, time change. If you're here at that time, what is the time, or what's the distance from this place to that place? So the accuracy that as a journalist that you have to have in telling a story is the same here, even though it's fiction. Make sure things are right, because people are gonna know, and they're gonna call you out on, hey, that's kind of wrong, or why did you say that? So doing that, but the actual writing, it came natural. The writing part wasn't difficult. It was when it was done. I'm done with this. So what do I do with this now? Who do I send it to? Who's going to read it? How can I get published? And so that was the challenging part. And then, getting those letters saying, no, thank you for submitting. So I think that was probably more difficult for me, just kind of staying focused, and hopeful that someone would see this and appreciate the work.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think, when you think of writing a book, you think of the challenges of, wow, this is, 150, 200, 250 pages, however many. But then, as you say, once you have written it, you have to actually get somebody to publish it, to market it, to do all of that. Were you able to? Did you find anyone who was able to advise you in that realm, in the publishing area?
Absolutely, which is kind of funny. I'm on, I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook, and there was a guy that I went to school with. He's a couple years behind me, and he had just published a book. And then I think he had did some fiction before, and so I congratulated him. And I was thinking, man, I should ask him a little more about, what's the process? How did you do this? Who did you talk to? And I had my synopsis written. And so I emailed him. I said, hey, I wrote a book. I've been trying to get it published. I can't find a publisher. You think you can look at my script and just kind of give me some pointers? And he said, well, just send the synopsis. And so I sent the synopsis. He said, this is pretty good. This is kind of interesting, And he said, but you know what? What you should do is do a chapter by chapter synopsis. I never knew that. And so after I did that, he said, you know what? I like this. I'm going to pass this on to my publisher. And the rest is history. I think about maybe a week or so, the publisher got in contact with me. So sometimes it's some luck. Sometimes it's who and then just not giving up.
Right. I mean, you have to keep persisting, and then, eventually, hopefully you find that opportunity, as you say, with a little bit of luck. Let's see. Now, when you were writing it, you said you started when you were overseas. Was it something that you talked about with your fellow service members?
No, 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 not at all. It was just something I did. I think maybe it kind of kept me sane to some extent. We all had to kind of figure out something we needed during that time. You're away from your family, and so that writing kind of helped me. So that was kind of a solo pursuit.
Private way to escape a little bit.
For sure.
Great. Okay. So you've been, a veteran, which we've talked about a little bit, a journalist, which we've talked about a little bit, and a professor as well. What would you say you found most rewarding about your teaching career?
The students that I impact, that I affect, that I help, and watching them develop. And so it's really nice. You have them, and then you see them 5 years later, or even a year or two, and see them pursuing something, whatever it is. It may not necessarily be journalism. It may be something else, but they're producing. They're productive citizens, and so that is rewarding. Watching people grow, and knowing that you've had a little part in that growth. I love it. And so I have students that are still reaching out to me like 10, 15 years later, and I love it. And I tell students that, once I'm your professor for life,
That's great. Okay. On the flip side, what teachers or professors, you mentioned, your school librarian from when you were a child, but what teachers or professors maybe in your higher education had an impact on you, would you say?
Well, I had a few. I would say, I went to Cal as an undergrad, and I had a few English professors that just, they just encouraged you. They encouraged me, and they saw some wealth, or they saw some worth in my writing early on. and there's some validation there. I remember I used this. I took a class, and I think I might have been a sophomore, so it's been a long time. I'm an old guy now, and I had a professor. It was a screenwriting class, and the professor said in the beginning of the semester, if you receive an A in this class, you can probably make it as a screenwriter if you want to do that. If you receive a B, maybe, but there's some work you have to do. And you receive a C, you qualify. You satisfy the qualifications of this class. I ended up getting that. We ended up writing 2 scripts, and I ended up getting an A for that class. And I remember him talking to me after he called me into his office, and he asked me, "Is this something you want to pursue? You should think about this seriously." And I ended up saying no because I was a practical guy, because my parents were, my grandfather was a steel mill worker. Journalism, I knew there was a job there. I can have a practical job. And so I never really pursued that. But again, that type of writing, fiction writing, was always there. But the guy gave me that validation that, you know what, you can do this. And I got a lot of that at Cal. And I was fortunate. And so I tried to do the same.
That has to be a great aspect of having gone there and teaching there now, that you can sort of pass on some of that, hopefully, to your students.
Oh, for sure. And I'm just fortunate. We have really good students, and really good students. So it's easy to guide them because they're already there. In fact, a lot of them are farther along than I was, and I'm amazed by them. And so it's nice to keep that connection.
Okay. Another question from the audience, did you have any stumbling blocks during the writing process? For example, when you had to balance writing while also being a college professor?
I did what I could do. And so there was times where I could write more, and there was times where I couldn't. But the key was just to keep writing. I think, again, being a journalist, you can't really have writer's block. As a journalist, if something happens, your job is to go cover it and produce something. So I think I took that mentality in feature writing. I wanted to finish this thing, and so I wrote. I sat down and wrote, and that was never really a problem as far as trying to finish something. Now, I think toward the end, how should I end this piece? That was kind of challenging. I wrote a different ending at one point, and then even after the ending that I ended up revising and sending, we ended up revising that ending again. So, around the end, how do you wrap this up? That might have been a little bit challenging.
I would imagine that's one of those things. You can pick up a book and you love the premise and you love the characters and you enjoy it all the way through, and you get to the ending and you go, that let me down, and that's the part you remember. So
yeah, and I didn't want to do that for people, and I wanted people to be surprised if they spent this time. I want them to get something from that time that you spent, with my book.
Another question from the audience about the publishing process. One is curious, how many rejections did you receive before you found a publisher, if you remember that?
Man, well, I think over the course, it was like 3 years, 20, 30, 40, I don't know. It was a lot. And I had a list of folks, but I would say at least 20, but probably more than that. And so it gets disheartening. And then you're trying to keep a record of where you sent the stuff so you don't keep sending it to the same place. And you're wondering, so I was trying to both find a publisher and try to find an agent. And I'm thinking, man, what's going on? So, at some point you stop and you're thinking, okay, I'm just going to take a break. I think I did that. I might have taken a break 1 point, 6 months, then maybe another point, a year. But I still didn't give up hope that I thought that what I wrote or what I produced, I thought it was something good. I thought it was something worthwhile. I thought it was something somebody would want eventually, and keep plugging away, and finally it happened. but it wasn't, it wasn't fun getting rejected. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'd imagine that would be tough, but you had faith in your material, so, and eventually it made its way through. We do have some other questions in the chat, but I wanted to see before I got to them, would you like to, because we're about 7:35 now, would you like to do a reading?
Yes, I would. I just need a minute to pull this thing up, and I'm gonna stop my video. I'm gonna pull this up, and then I'll read. Give me a second.
All right. And if I haven't gotten your question in the chat, I will get to it in the section after Dr. Carlisle does his reading. And while he's doing the reading, if you have questions that come up, feel free to put them in that chat.
I can still answer questions if you want as I'm pulling this up. Just want to.
Okay. Let's see then. One that's probably quick, because I wasn't sure about this. I just wanted to make sure. Were you born in the South? I know the title character returns to the South, but are you from the South, or are you born locally?
I am actually from the North. I was born in Swickley, Pennsylvania, but my grandparents are from the South. And so that's kind of where I got the idea for the book. I spent some time in the South as a kid. And I knew the stories, and again, my parents were my grandparents, I call them my parents, they raised me. My grandparents, they were so embedded that I feel like I'm from the South to some extent. But no, I'm a Northern guy. But my grandfather let me know that too. You're a Northern guy, you guys don't know anything. Yeah, you don't got anything on our Southern guys. I have my document up, so I can share my screen however you want me to do it.
Sure, yeah, go ahead and share. I'll probably mute myself as well while you're doing the reading.
Okay, sharing it now. All right, so I'm just reading from the first 11 pages, and it kind of sets the stage of the main character, who he is, kind of circumstance, why he's doing what he's doing, his thought process about this, and also we're introduced to another main character as well. So I'll go ahead and get started. I was heading back home, not the home I knew as a child, but a home that was mine all the same. It was my beloved home of my mother and all of his Jim Crow past. It was the home of my father, who barely survived it with all of his ornery ways. It was the home of their parents and their parents' parents, who picked cotton, shared crop, and worked the land until they no longer could. And it was home to their ancestral enslaved parents who toiled day and night under the firm grip of master's whip. Clayhatchee, Alabama was my inherited home. Collard greens, black-eyed peas, chitlins, string beans, sweet yams, cornbread, and all. It was a home that I needed to get back to more than I could ever know. Mama was dead. Daddy had died 6 months earlier. It was Mama who made me leave New York, my job, my plush condo, my ex-girlfriend, drive 1,130.38 miles in nearly 19 hours on I-81 South. Mom made it back home before I did. Well, Mama's body made it there, where it was received by her sister Aunt Dee. Mama desperately needed to be buried in Clayhatchee, even after building a life in the North for more than half a century. Mama told Daddy she would go back home someday, but Daddy had been adamant about never returning. That place meant nothing to him but rednecks, crackers, abuse, and oppression. He was too old now for any of that foolishness, and that was a damn fool notion for Mama to return. Mama argued that things had changed. The South, they knew no longer existed. She would tell Daddy how the South had elected Black mayors, council members, sheriffs, judges, and Black people had really moved up the ladder to become middle class. All that foolishness they knew was over. Daddy never bought it. For Mama's part, she kept threatening the old man that she would leave him and make her way home. If she wanted to leave Daddy, Mama had her pick of reasons, starting with his cheating ways. Daddy loved women, and women loved Daddy. Mama for years looked the other way until one day she stopped and looked Daddy square in the eyes. He had to make a choice between having a lifetime of true love with his wife or kids, or have fleeting moments from an array of low, no-account fast women. Daddy chose correctly, remained in good marital standing for the rest of his life. Nonetheless, he remained hard still. Hard on Mama, hard on his children, hard on life. Daddy carried around a mean streak that kept him from fearing any man, and when it called on those who encountered him to respect him always, or disrespect him at their own peril. One thing for certain, Daddy loved Mama and he would kill for her. And Mama loved Daddy, even with all of his disagreeable ways. Soon after Daddy died, Mama was planning a trip to Clayhatchee, announcing that she would be returning with a surprise. She was excited about returning home. Clayhatchee had grown from that small clay dirt town of the 1930s and 40s that she and Daddy knew when they were young. Now in 2004, it was a small city featuring quaint neighborhoods and historic districts. The community of 18,000 residents promoted itself as a tourist destination, particularly to those interested in mid-20th century civil rights struggles. It was the home of Clayhatchee University, which transformed from a small state teachers college in the 19th century to a world-class education center of research and technology. Mama was making preparations to visit her childhood home when she suffered a stroke. But each passing day, deterioration made her less my mama, the woman who remained vibrant and energetic as she aged, and more of an unrecognizable, feeble old woman who seemed to welcome death. Just 4 months after suffering her stroke, Mama had become bedridden, going in and out of consciousness. The doctor said she was dying. With that, the family rallied around Mama to ensure her affairs were in order. It was during that time that Mama, in a moment of clarity and consciousness, made me promise that her final resting place would not be Pittsburgh, but the dark, rich soil of Clayhatchee. As I took exit 79, I felt a gush of heat so intense it seemed to singe my eyebrows. The air was thick, making my breathing a concerted effort between my brain and lungs. It was that type of heat that gives an illusion that the air is on fire. As much as the South claimed its modernity, I felt as if I had been transported to an early period. The homes located just off the exit were more shanty than houses, and the spacing of the houses provided a sense of desertion. At one shanty home, a dark-skinned boy couldn't be older than 4 stood on a wooden porch, barefoot and shirtless. Behind him, a young girl opened the screen door, a smaller child on her hip. In all that emptiness, a BP gas station seemed to sprout. I needed a drink, gas, and as always, direction. It wasn't that I was lost. I just didn't want to become lost. How close am I to Clayhatchee? I asked the white clerk. She was round, puffy, and middle class with black rimmed glasses that intersected with her brown, curly hair. She had a generous smile. Honey, you're about a half an hour away. Just stay on this street until you see Route 8, then make a left. I live in Clayhatchee. Where exactly are you trying to go? I'm trying to find 146 Robinson Road. Oh, I can tell you how to get to Robinson Road. Route 8, after 2 miles, turns into Robinson Road. You will see MLK Elementary School to your left. Go past MLK. Don't go past Mount Zion Baptist Church, or you've gone too far. It's a straight shot. Pretty simple. Hey, you have a good day, sweetie, and welcome to Clayhatchee. Not the reception I thought I would receive from the first white person I encountered in Atlanta, Dixie. I had seen those PBS specials, black folks marching, attack dogs barking, white people shouting, redneck police officers swinging clubs. It couldn't be the South my father fled in 1949, but I had been mentally preparing myself for whatever residual racist attitudes lingered from the sting of nearly 300 years of slavery and another 100 years of Jim Crow, torture, degradation, and discrimination. I didn't care what Mama said. Racial problems persisted in the North, so I was certain that it hadn't been eradicated in the South. It didn't matter how many schools we integrated, lunch counters we ate at, how many millions we made singing, dancing, running and shooting and catching, or how many white girls or boys we were humping. Racism was alive and well and breathing lustily throughout America, North and South. No, heading this far down South had never appealed to me. Plus, I'm his worst nightmare. I'm an educated black man who didn't ascribe the king's position of turning the other cheek. If you don't know, now you know, baby. But I'd admit to being curious about my parents' heritage and how much it had changed in the land of cotton. I wanted to see what it was all about. Maybe uncover some buried secrets and fossils. Something significant had occurred here. Mama wouldn't let it go, and Daddy chose not to remember. I wanted to know what it was. Why did my mother love this place? Why did my father despise it? How much different would my experience be from hers, from his, from theirs? Why did she have to be buried here? And more importantly, why did I have to be the one to do it? When I left for Alabama, it was to bury Mama. Turns out I was going there for much more than I could have ever imagined. The rattling from the ghosts of the past grew louder the closer I came to Clayhatchee. "You're a dead nigger," Peter Smalls said just before his throat was slashed. Smalls fell to the ground, clutching his neck, gasping for air. The powerfully built black man stood over Petey, now flailing on the ground. After wiping the blood off his shiny blade with a white handkerchief, he tucked the weapon into his pocket. "That makes 2 dead crackers tonight. Just one more to go," the black man said before disappearing into the night. During my drive to the South, I thought about how nothing had been simple about this trip. I was rushing to meet with relatives whom I hadn't laid eyes on since I was 14. I was planning my mother's second funeral, and it had to be quick, no more than 3 days. I loved Mama, but I needed to get back to my life and my job as a reporter at the New York Daily News. I needed to finish this last piece of a 4-part series about corruption in City Hall that consumed nearly a year of my life. It had everything: sex, drugs, money, and race. My editor, Ed Ketty, had pushed to get the series finished. I was almost there. I needed to nail down these final interviews, write quickly, and ship my story off to my slave-driving editor. Ketty, in a human moment, told me that I didn't need to finish the piece this week. They had waited for it this long from the world's slowest reporter. It's just to take care of my family's business. But I was becoming anxious. The story couldn't hold much longer. I didn't want to be scooped. I needed to take care of Mama's business so I could take care of my own. We had already said our goodbyes to Mama with a large ceremony in Pittsburgh. All Mama's friends and church members were there, as were our northern family. Reverend Walker officiated, reminding us how Elaine had been a faithful servant to the Lord. She served First Baptist Church in Homewood for nearly half a century in the senior choir as the deaconess and later as the church elder mother. Reverend Walker said Sister Elaine was now standing before the Lord and hearing the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Cousin Pam from Indiana sang Mama's favorite song, "Going to Meet the King." I cried a lot. I cried too much. I was all cried out. In a weakened moment with my sentiments, I discussed Mama's last wish with my older brothers and sisters, Mark, Francis, and Cecilia. Who's going to take her?" Francis immediately asked, while quickly adding she could not because her job would not allow her to take off any more days. Mark said the trip would be too much for him and his wife and 3 children. Cecilia was a crackhead who I wouldn't trust to deliver a bottle of pop next door. She asked me, I said angrily. "I'll do it. I'll take Mama back home by myself." I would assure that Mama made it to Franklin Memorial Funeral Home in Clayhatchee. I would go down there by myself, have another ceremony with my family, those living in the Cotton Belt, and quickly get back to New York. I was resigned to make sure it was done right. That's the least I could do. Mama spoiled me. I was her surprise baby. Mama was 40 when I was born. Daddy I was surprised for sure. The last of 5 children of Elaine and John Kingsman. They named me James after my older brother who died trying to come into the world. Mama proclaimed me the gift to the chagrin of my siblings. My brother, sister's not any better. Mama was the gift. We owe everything to her. The gas station attendant provided me with perfect directions, and I just followed the signs all the way into Clayhatchee. My family lived on the outer edges of the town past Hickory Drive. The area still had a royal flavor to it. Germinated from high weeds and wildflowers emerged big old houses with wooden porch swings. However, the country filled with its holiness and slowness could not keep city life from creeping in. Across the road from the country homes were MLK Elementary School and then the MLK housing projects. Everything seemed to be named for Martin Luther King Jr. in the South. Slowing down, looking into in the rural side of the road, I saw Aunt Dee on her porch. She was shucking green peas. She loomed big as I remember, her girth occupying much of the porch swing. As I approached, she seemed to be in thought, in touch, and in tune with herself and the world, humming the old church hymn, "Sweet Little Sweet Chariot." She looked up, smiled, discarding the pea bowl and stretching out her arms for me in one impressive motion. "Is that you, boy? That is you," said Aunt Dee as she pulled me in with her kisses, hugs, and righteous laughter. It didn't matter I was 29, I'd been on my own for years and worked for one of the country's largest newspaper. I was still boy to her. I had missed Aunt D. I forgot how much I loved her. As a child growing up, she visited us often in the summer. Unapologetic about her fear of flying, Aunt D made the trek to Pittsburgh on a Greyhound bus. Aunt D emerged big. Everything stood big about her. Big body, big personality, big voice. And she used her bigness for effect. Her big laugh would have us rolling on the floor. Her big voice with a hint of anger struck fear in our hearts and trembling to our knees. She was boisterous, unrepentant, and real. She told it like it was. That's probably why she and Daddy got along. She was one of the few people who stood up to him. He liked her for that. Also, Daddy liked that it didn't take much for Aunt D to put a switch to us, a woman after his own heart. Hey, Aunt D, I said as I welcomed her embrace. Welcome home, boy, she said, squeezing me tighter. Let me look at you, James. You've grown into a fine-looking man. Sit down, sit down. You hungry? I was 14 the last time I saw Aunt D, and although some things might slip my mind in time, I never forgotten three things about Aunt D: her cooking, her belly laugh, and her fondness for using switches on us. Aunt D looked old, but it was an unchanged old. She had always appeared old to my brother and sisters, even when she was in her late 40s. Now in her mid-70s, her oldness stood justified. I guess that worries from the past, men, children, money, health, life, had taken some shine from her, bent her over a little more, slowed her movement. But she was still on D, even as she stood with the cane, walked with the cane, moved with the cane. Diabetes, or sugar as my parents like to call it, had hit Aunt D hard in the last several years. The disease caused the loss of sight in her right eye. With no real purpose, the eye itself had become lazy. Aunt D, who had been a hellion, had found God in the last 2 years. She worshiped the Lord with as much zest as she did back in the day when she was tearing through juke joints, men, and moonshine. But even as she had gotten right with the big man upstairs, Aunt D still had a little devil in her. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. And, you said before your reading that, we all know an Aunt D, and just from that reading, I would say I think I do know a couple. I was curious in your writing. I know we talked about this a little bit before, but do you have siblings? I was curious if you based your sibling relationships on anybody who was there, or if they were, a mixture.
Well, I have siblings. I have two brothers and a daughter. I mean, a daughter and a sister, a younger sister. However, I was raised by my grandparents. So my aunts and uncles, in a lot of ways, were like siblings. And so I would say there's probably a mixture of folks there, but I'm not saying anymore.
It's probably wise. It's a good course. Yeah. So, but Aunt D, did you feel that she was inspired by your grandmother, or was it a different family member, or was it once again a combination?
Honestly, she was inspired by actual aunt, my aunt Liza, my grandmother's sister, from Troy, Alabama. And she used to like, what I remember about her, she was loud and she was tough and she loved wrestling. She would watch wrestling all the time. And she would cuss like a sailor. And she was just a lot of fun to be around. So when I was thinking about this character, I was thinking about her.
Okay. Yeah. Another thing that struck me from the reading, something that I think is interesting in a lot of Black authors, but also just in the lives of Black people, is the dual relationship with the South. You write it as your mother loved it, your father hated it, and I think that's, even for Black people who've never lived in the South, there's that kind of relationship because there's a history there, but there's also a painful element to that. You visited the South and you said your grandfather made sure to let you know that you were Northern. But what were your interactions like with the family members who were your age, who were maybe more Southern?
It was just fun, and I just can remember just being there and just doing things, just being outside. They liked baseball. I think I had a cousin that was a little bit older. He's a teenager. He played baseball, so it was a big event. People were taking coolers and food, and it just spending walking, just doing little things that the kids did for fun, walking to the pool, you know. We went on a farm. I remember doing things like that, feeding hogs. I remember sitting on the porch with my aunts, shucking peas, so, you did those things, those connections. So yeah, I spent some time down there. There's that connection. We're always connected. That migration, regardless, even if you don't go, there's that connection to that self, to that past. I think it's in all of us. And it's good to be able to tap into that.
Yeah, and just to remind anybody, if you'd like, we're sort of towards the end of the program. If you feel like unmuting yourself and asking a question personally, you can, but you can also continue to put anything into the chat function, and I will continue to read it off. And there's also, I just wanted to mention, just nice comments about the chapter as well, which I really enjoyed. So I'm gonna have to get my hands on a copy. Now, what advice might you have for others who want to begin a career in writing? Would that differ? Would it from fiction to nonfiction? And you've talked about writing about your experiences. Any advice you'd offer?
Yeah, for sure. So, first of all, I would say read everything. Read things that you may not even be remotely interested in. You just want to see what other people are writing. So read all types of different things so you can figure out what you're interested in and what you like to read. Start there. Become an avid reader. I think, to be a good writer, you have to be a reader. And then just start writing. If you have an interest and you want to write, then write. Now, as far as publishing, I think there's some differences. If you're writing fiction, you're writing a novel, you can kind of just sit down and write something that comes to you. Whereas if you're thinking about nonfiction, you're thinking about what is out there now. What are the trends, or actually what's going to be out there maybe 2 years from now if your book is published, or how can you say this differently than what someone else is doing out there now? So it's a bit different, in the process. So you have to be a bit more strategic in your thinking.
Right, there's that struggle to have a fresh take. I mean, if you're writing nonfiction, you may be writing about history, and history never changes, but our interpretation of it does. So it's always an interesting thing to see people have new perspectives and bring that to the table. Let's see. Now, this is a question in the chat from before, but do you have any more plans to do any more fiction writing? Do you have anything in the works or anything you're thinking about?
Yes. So, and as well, I mean, I think this particular story came in a dream, and so I kind of, when I woke up, I kind of wrote down what I dreamed just so I wouldn't forget. And so I plan on it. I need to do some research, but I have a general idea of what it is, how it's going to, how I get it started. But it does entail some research. Now, what's funny, and I plan on actually really doing it this summer, to actually get started on that. But what's funny, since this book has been out, people are asking me about this specific book. So are you going to write another book with these characters? Because, folks are starting to connect to these characters, particularly Bunky and James, and I would say Bunky mostly. So, who knows? There may be, another book connected to this one in some way, some function, some form, so we can see James and Bunky in action again.
All right, the Carlisle literary universe might expand. All right. If anybody has any, final questions they'd like to ask, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can unmute and ask. Otherwise, I think we'll start to wrap up pretty soon, unless there's anything you'd like to touch on, Dr. Carlisle.
Is there any questions before I touch on anything? Okay, there aren't. Thank you for this time. You know, it's just this was a labor of love. I think that the story is an important story because it's really, again, it's talking about these issues of things that are happening, that have happened in the past that haven't been dealt with. And so we're kind of having this conversation on a larger scale about what to teach about history, what should we neglect, to kind of not look at some of the things that have happened. And when you do those things come back in the present. And so I think at this point, I didn't plan this way, but I think the book is apropos of what's going on currently with dealing with some of these issues of racism, systemic racism, and some of the things, the ugliness that we don't look at, because if we don't deal with it, it's going to keep coming up and it's going to haunt us, like the ghost from Souls of Clayhatchee.
Right. Yeah, I think it's very important subject matter that we really haven't processed as a country or as a people. So yeah, I look forward to reading this book, and thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for coming out, and thank you to everybody who came, and thank you. We do have a question or a comment before we wrap up for the evening, so you can go right ahead, Mr. Rice.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfectly.
Hey, I just wanted to just give I guess some encouragement to my frat brother, Dr. Carlisle. I got the book on Kindle. I still haven't started it yet, so my apologies. But just from hearing a little bit of one chapter, it sounds really good. So I just want to give some encouragement and say I'm proud of you, and keep doing your thing. And yeah, just proud of you, and keep up the good work.
I appreciate you, bro. Thank you, man.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the reading. We have one more person who's coming in, but just so everybody knows, if you'd like to revisit this program in the future, we did record it this evening, so we'll be posting that to our social media, hopefully tomorrow, but at latest early next week. So that should go up. You can find that on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel, and we'll have also a link there to where you can purchase the book if you'd like. So
I'd like to thank you, Corey, and I'd just like to thank the Monroeville Public Library for this opportunity. I appreciate this platform.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thank you for, you know, being willing to participate in this. We were very glad to have the opportunity.
I'd like to give a shout out to my frat brother too. It's a very excellent book, and I'm looking for that movie.
All right, Fred.
All right. Thank you all, and have a good night, everyone.
Take care.
Good night.